All right, Terry, should we get going?
Yes, Erin, why don't you go ahead and go?
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for AAF Omaha's Professional Development Program. I'm Erin Berman. I'm co-owner and brand strategist at Folk Branding and Design. I serve on the AAF Board of Directors along with Ginny Allenbaugh from Anderson Partners. And AAF Omaha has been offering professional development programs and webinars, thought leaders, and fun activities for our members virtually throughout the pandemic. We've really learned a lot along the way, and we'll continue to offer virtual programming in the coming months. We anticipate getting back to in-person events when it feels safe for our members to gather, and we'll be in touch regarding all of that. For this presentation, we'll be open for Q&A towards the end of the program, so feel free to use the Q&A function with your questions during the discussion. Just type those in there and we'll make sure that we get to them towards the end. AAF Omaha is a unifying voice for advertising in the Omaha Council Bluffs metro area. We offer an organization to educate, inspire, and bring an inclusive sense of community to advertising professionals in our area so that we and future generations can continue to do the work we love. Events like today's professional development programming are free to our members as a membership benefit. And we have been working hard throughout the year to bring more value and benefits to your membership. Today, we are really happy to welcome back Larry Brantley, the Vice Chair of the AAF Council of Governors. We would like to thank Larry and all members of AAF COG for the leadership across the country. A little bit more about Larry, if you weren't here in August for his first event. He is the president of Chaloner, and Chaloner is a national executive search firm specializing in communications, public relations, and marketing recruitment. He has more than 30 years of experience in communications, marketing, and advertising fields. One of his first key jobs was as a packaging designer for Frito-Lay, where he developed his networking and people skills. And he eventually started the first creative staffing firm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Since then, he has been involved in recruiting and placement of industry professionals, both nationally and internationally. And he has worked with such firms as JCPenney, HP, EDS, Texas Instruments, Lord & Taylor, Sears, Tracy Locke, Ryan Partnership, ConocoPhillips, Frito-Lay, and Alcone Marketing. And he has placed brand creative, account service, interactive and web, public relations, marketing, media, traffic, production, and other executive level talent. He has been interviewed as a staffing expert by the Wall Street Journal, the Dallas Morning News, the Houston Chronicle, Promo Magazine, Communication Arts Magazine, Dallas Men Magazine, the Dallas Business Journal, and the Houston Business Journal. He's an award-winning designer through IABC, which is the International Association of Business Communicators, and is a long-term member of AAF, where he serves as part of the executive leadership for the 10th District, and as I mentioned, currently serves as the vice chair of the AAF Council of Governors on the national level. He currently splits his time between Dallas and New York, and he told us he's in New York today, so that's great. And he has 3 sons. If you have not done so already, Larry's going to start, so go ahead and mute yourself and feel free to use the Q&A function. And Larry, I'll turn it right over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Erin. Let's share the screen here. All right. Well, thank you all again for having me back. I really appreciate it. Couple of things, just kind of circle back a little bit on what we talked about the last time. Our last presentation in August was really focused on how to get the most out of your LinkedIn profile and what are the tips and tricks to improve your visibility. We're going to that next level today on now it's about becoming the ideal new hire. Some of that's using social media, some of that's using specifically LinkedIn, but hopefully you'll again walk away with a couple of tips that will help you to improve your visibility and therefore increase your opportunities should you be looking for a new position or looking to leverage your current role into the next step. So let's get started. Our outline today, we're going to talk a little bit more about the hiring process today. It's very different. If you have not been looking for a job in the last 12 months, it's light years of difference. So I'll share with you from the inside what we see, how it works, and what you should expect. We'll also talk about the importance of clearly defining your goals. What's next for you in your career? What are you looking for? And that will include targeting. targeting the region, targeting the level, targeting the role, targeting the salary. All of that will be discussed. Fitting the job description. Today's market is not the time to leverage what you've done to try and branch into something new. It's about leveraging your skills and abilities to enhance the next level. So doing a transition without the experience, it won't happen. And I'll explain a little bit more later why that's so important. We will circle back to the importance of what to include or not to include in your resume, what it's like to fit into the corporate culture. And it's very different since 85% of those who are hired today have yet to even meet the hiring manager. It's all a video interview and hire. So you may not even travel to the corporate office today if you're looking at a role in a new market. So how do you fit into that culture when you can't sit beside them or see what it's like in the office environment? We'll also talk about the interview prep. Again, very different than it was 14 months ago with Zoom interviews or WebEx or Microsoft Teams, preparing for a video interview and how to be comfortable and do well. And then we'll also talk at the very end on salary. What is a reasonable range, how to negotiate, what to say, what not to say, and should you accept that first offering. Let's get started. So in the job search itself, there is a logical process from the determining what you want to do in the next step, filling out the application, the interview, your skills, the search, and then ultimately zooming in on what really matters for you. And that changes. In today's market, most companies are looking for growth to capitalize on the market share, or it's a new role. They're trying to backfill a position, maybe someone, and there's been a lot of movement already in 2021. My firm is busier than it's ever been. In fact, we blew out our first quarter numbers. I was hoping to hire new people third and fourth quarter. I'm actually hiring them now so we can keep up. So a lot of good things going on. So replacements in certain roles, like if you're in the PR space or public relations and you've got tech or biotech, healthcare, that is one of the hottest career paths right now, and we can't grow them fast enough. So it depends on what your expertise is. So understanding the reasoning for the opening, it could be a new market expansion, it could be a new division, or maybe you just went through a merger with another company and therefore they've done some right sizing and now they've left some voids and they've got to fill those positions. And we'll also talk about those key influencers, which aren't necessarily your references. These are people who help direct you and avoid the bumps and bruises. That could be a recruiter like myself. It could be a professional associate that you know who knows a little bit of background about the company or the experience that they went through in searching. And it could be also your references themselves. In this Venn diagram, there's a lot of them out there. I'll start there. But when you're trying to target and determine what's next for you, I found this particular one to be very effective because each of them kind of correlate to those key things I was talking about from a career, what you're calling, what is your potential. You may want to be a lawyer, but you may be really hard at persuading other people and not good skill. You shouldn't be a lawyer. So doing this process and evaluating what the world needs, what I get paid for, what are my individual strengths, and what I love. And when you can get all of these to come together, that's the sweet spot. That's the right place to be. And as a recruiter, that's one of the things we work on, of really asking those questions and determining. And again, it could be that maybe that's what you really want to do, but no one wants to hire for it. So we'll also give you that feedback on what the market will bear and what you can expect. And defining your goals, these are some of the things that you will get from a Venn diagram and going through that exercise. So you'll determine on the search, where do you go? So it's going to be online. In today's world, everything's digital. The traditional word of mouth at an event, we're not doing that. Or seeing something posted and published, we're not out in the world as much as we were, so you're not going to see it anywhere. So online is where you will find out about opportunities or events like this, where there's someone speaking and networking online through a video interaction. So word of mouth, it still comes down to the people you know and what you hear. And then of course, search firms like ours. You need to qualify. And what I mean by that is determine what is my current salary? What am I looking to make? And are we aligned? What are the skills required? What are the benefits that I need for my family? You have to know the answer to that before you even begin to pursue a job search. If you're an individual, benefits sometimes aren't as critical. Maybe vacation is something when we can travel again. So all those questions have to be asked. What is the growth projection in the role? If you're looking to invest in an employer, where do I go from here? And some of those things will come out in the interview itself, but you need to know what your answers are before you can even begin to explore other opportunities. You also need to qualify your personal connections, whether it's an alumni connection or if it's someone through AAF that you know, or another professional association or your community or your church, whatever affiliations you have that help to give stability and justification in that path. When you submit a resume or your application, you're typically going to go through a job portal. Like if you're applying for a role that we have, you go through our website, you fill out a really basic application, which basically upload your resume. But there will be some sort of job portal, whether it's with a recruiter or monster.com or through an individual corporation. You will have to provide your email, a mailing address. You will typically go through a phone call, which is a pre-screen, and then in person or a video meeting, and then a follow-up with the recruiter. Interviews in today's world, everything's all over the place. I've had one client in January who was so anxious about a candidate. In the very first interview, she hadn't even gone 15 minutes and he was calling me with an offer. And I told him, cool your jets, slow down. You're going to scare her. No one, you always want to be accepted and wanted, but within 15 minutes, your interview is a little intimidating. I still made it work, but yeah, so you have to set that pace of what to expect on the interview. So a phone or a video interview, right now I see several clients going through multiple panel interviews. Before they get to an executive, a CEO or president interview. Face-to-face, in the last 14 months, we've probably placed about 75 people. There have only been 2 companies where anyone did an in-person interview, and it was an outdoor coffee shop. So the world's changed. There are some clients that we have who are still insisting on not moving forward with the executive level until they can have face-to-face. But I have others like McDonald's, who we've placed social media people who work for them. And that McDonald's is one that used to be very rigid about you had to be in the office. But the person that we just placed is in Dallas, Texas. So the rules have changed. So it depends on what you're doing and how you interact. But face-to-face is not always an absolute, as well as testing or assessment. Some, if you're in account management, they may ask for a case study. If you're a writer, they'll have you do a writing assignment, but those aren't always required. In the communications and advertising space, a portfolio, if you're a creative, for sure is required, but all of that is flexible. And then of course, references. We always ask for 3 to 5, and they should be people that you've either reported to or people you've managed, or it could be a client, or it could be a vendor that you do a lot of business with. All of those could qualify. At most professional levels, who you had a class with in college or family friends are not acceptable at this phase. If you're an intern, maybe. Seasoned professionals, we don't look for those personal references. And then of course, the offer negotiation. For us, again, knowing, I always ask a candidate, usually within the first 5 minutes, what are your salary expectations? What would you be targeting? It's not always the easiest question to answer, but it is the #1 most critical, because if I don't know where you're headed, I can't help to get you there. So I need to know what the expectation, even if it's a large range, I need to know. So in targeting, things that are important to keep in mind: where is it located? How far is the commute? Is it a 10-minute commute? Is it an hour and a half? Do they provide relocation? What kind of dollars? Or is it a virtual or remote position? There are a lot of roles. Not everything in today's market can be remote, but most companies that I know of, even here in New York, even in Texas, are not going back into the office until end of June at the earliest, so that there's a significant amount of herd immunity. But that's going to be a moving scale of when that time frame happens. So will it be remote until everyone's back in? And if so, what is the expectation of when I need to relocate to the market? You also really use your friends through AF or your family connections. There's no shame in that. They will give you the honest truth whether you want it or not. And you need that critique, someone who cares about you, who's unbiased. Even if you ultimately go a different direction, you need that feedback. What type of firm is it? Is it an agency? Is it a corporate? Is it a vendor? Is it a services firm? Is it a startup? You need to qualify that in the targeting of what your level of acceptance would be, as well as the type of industry. Is it consumer packaged goods, retail, hospitality, fashion? I will tell you the industries that are the hottest right now: healthcare, pharmaceutical, biotech, but also anything in the food chain, whether it's consumer packaged goods or food production. Again, I mentioned health, but also legal and insurance are also high demands because everyone's storing up those nest eggs for future needs or rainy days, or they're protecting their interest in the event, God forbid, something happened, how to take care of those they might leave behind. So those areas are extremely busy. The industries that are not fully up to speed are hospitality and tourism. Those are not there yet, but I expect that's going to start slowly over the summer evolving. What are your long-term goals? And when I ask many young professionals, they can't answer what they're thinking about 2 years from now, much less 5 to 10 years. But my point is you need to be asking those questions. Do you see yourself owning your own agency one day? Do you want to be the CEO or the CMO or chief creative officer? What is your goal? And the goals change. I mean, I started the Bachelor of Fine Arts and did packaging for Frito-Lay for many years, loved it. But here I am now the president of executive search staffing firm, very different world, but I'm very happy, very content. So your goals can change. Your career path can go many directions, and that is perfectly fine, but you have to keep asking those questions. It should be a role that has portable skills to different markets. One of the reasons why, as advertisers and communicators, you can be anywhere is because we're all connected online through digital means. So that allows us to work with anyone, including internationally. And that's how I'm able to speak to you when normally in the past, someone would have to book a flight, a hotel, deal with all the shuttling back and forth. You go in, you do your maybe 2 hours, a little bit before prep, the presentation and follow-up, and then you're back to the airport. Now I can jump on with 5 to 10 minutes notice. I'm online and I can speak to you. So again, all those with work also modify and change depending on if it's portable skills. Ideally, you want to have flexible hours for interviews if you're going into that full force, whether it's in afternoons or if it's maybe around the lunchtime or early in the morning before people's days get crazy. My experience is if you're interviewing, the easier times are usually end of day or around the lunch breaks where people can work something in right after lunch. But again, keep those things in mind for yourself as well as the person you might be speaking with. I mentioned earlier about fitting the job description. It's not the time if you want to be a brain surgeon and you just graduated dental college. It's not the time. It's not the place. It really, in many cases, never was. But there have been some times where individuals come in and say, give me 30 minutes on this software and I'll have it up to speed. That's not today. So you need to hit the ground running with your field of expertise, something that you bring to the table that's solid and is a match. It also should be a job function that you have performed before as a copywriter or as an account management or account executive. And then your years of experience are a match. I had a young man who had great skills that I spoke to this morning who applied for a communications director role. My minimum criteria in the role was 12 to 15 years, and this client is totally inflexible. He had 5. So I had to gently tell him, what are you thinking? But I'm here to help. You've got great skills, but you're not even at the minimum threshold. If you had 11 years, I might push it, but this client, again, would not budge. So your years of experience should match. You will spin your wheels and you'll get extremely frustrated if you keep applying for roles that you do not match apples to apples what they're asking for. Certain things flex. Years of experience and industry knowledge are not two that flex. In your resume, and again, this is subjective. I've been doing this a long time. And again, in a digital world, these things are things I suggest so that you have higher visibility and people actually review your resume. It should be 2 pages or less. If it runs longer, that's fine. But if you're up to 10 pages, you better start editing because no one's going to take the time to read it. It needs to be in Microsoft Word format or text, no flat PDFs. A lot of creatives will do all this nice design on a resume, think, well, I'm a creative, they expect this. I'm telling you, we don't. We do not care what font you have your header or your name. It doesn't matter. And when you save it as a flat PDF, our applicant tracking systems will not convert it into text. So you are 0 to us. We know nothing about you. None of that will parse into the database. And we're not going to type it all in ourselves. So if it doesn't parse, you're automatically out. So save yourself the frustration, keep it in Microsoft Word, or even if you do it in Adobe, save it as text, not as a flat PDF. It should include your contact information, your full name, your address. I'm not saying give away your specific street address, but city and state for sure. You need to have your email, a phone contact. If you prefer to be contacted via your cell, make sure it's noted. And then any social media links, especially your LinkedIn link. If you don't want to incorporate your Twitter handle or your Facebook page, that's fine, but your LinkedIn profile is absolutely imperative. You also need an objective statement that should be short and sweet. I can look at your history and determine what you've done and what you're capable of doing. Doesn't mean that's what you want to do today. So tell me, it could be that you want to take certain skills you've learned and go to that next level. Or maybe you've been an account supervisor and you're ready to step into an account director role. Or maybe it's a creative role where you've been on the copywriting side and you've got some design skills. You'd like to find a role that bridges the gap where you can use your hand skills as a designer in addition to your copywriting skills. But that's what I'm talking about. Doesn't need to be multiple paragraphs. A couple of sentences are sufficient. Your work history, including all, depending on the level. I mean, if you're someone like myself who has been in the market in a career professional role at some point or capacity for 30 years, I don't need your internship. I can tell you what mine is, but save that for a conversation. So, but it does need to incorporate, if you are, I would say, between 3 to 15 years experience, all of that shows relevance on your path and your journey as a career professional. So share those things. If you are especially less than 5 years, you need as much information as possible. And if someone is only showing relative experience to their degreed path, I'm missing data. So let's say you have a gap in your resume and you're only showing the time you started work in your industry, trade again. I don't have the explanation of how you spent your time. I'd rather see someone busy than not, especially in the past 12 months when COVID hit, so many people were impacted by downsizing. It's better that you're staying busy doing something than just waiting for the world to catch up to you. Your educational experience, and again, I don't necessarily need to know the year you graduated, but did you get a degree? And what is the degree? Your hardware, software skills are always important. Professional organizations like AAF, I will tell you, if I see someone send a resume and they've been in AAF, they will get an interview. I do favor individuals who are tied to associations that I have an affiliation with. Also, if someone's got philanthropy or volunteerism in their background, whether it's donating at a local food shelter or something helping people build homes like Habitat for Humanity, all of that matters. Any awards or recognition are nice, but again, if someone has done none of the other things I've talked about and they have awards, they may or may not get a call because it's more to it than the awards. Awards matter, but I want to know that you're active, involved, and that you're someone that a client will be excited to speak to. And then, of course, your references. We've talked about that earlier of what they should look like, and calling and prepare them in advance when you're about to get an offer is extremely important so that they take our calls, and also they have a heads up and they know that you thought enough of them to consider them in that task. In today's world, for every job posting, and this is still true today, there are about 250 resumes for every application. Out of those, 4 to 6 will be interviewed. That's typically what we narrow down for a slate. Only one person gets the job. So it's not that you have to have everything, you just have to have one more card in your deck than the other candidates being considered. So one more thing that you bring to the table that enhances you as a viable candidate for consideration. In today's world, again, whether it be phone or video interviews, all of these things are great tools. This was something I lifted that Katie Coppell did in 2018 that's very relevant today. Keep your current resume in front of you. And your LinkedIn, this is a tip that I shared last time with you on your LinkedIn profile. Your resume and LinkedIn should match because we put them side by side, and something looks amiss, that's a major red flag. So keep your resume for reference. If they ask, well, I see that you were at this place between these 5 years. Tell me a little about what you learned in that experience. So keep it at the ready. You may have it at the top of your head, but you want to make sure what you've listed and what they're referring to is right there. You also, and again, this has changed a lot. So not all of us have landlines anymore, but cell, as we all know, in the last 12 months, cell signals can drop, especially in like the winter storm we had in Texas a few months back. It was hideous. So if you have a landline, it's very important that you have access without the call getting dropped. You definitely want to turn off call waiting if you have that feature, or your notifications. Nothing more irritating than you're trying to talk and someone's notifications are ding, ding, ding. It's just not professional. You want to have a checklist in advance. You should have your list of questions you want to make sure are covered, as well as answer the questions they ask you. You want to have the room clear of distractions. And again, we're all quite often working from home, like I am in my apartment in New York today, and my neighbors or kids are running up and down the hall that I can hear in the background, but they're not in my office. They're not in my home here. So clear the room of distractions. The cat jumping on your shoulder it's not that time for the cute picture of the cat climbing over your shoulder. You need to have all distractions, children, spouses, pets, everything out. Have pen and paper so you can take notes. And then be sure if they're running late or you notice that their schedule is chaotic. I often, at the beginning of an interview, will ask, how's your day going? What is going? If someone's having a bad day or something is amiss, or they just got pulled in a meeting and they're running short on time, ask if they would like to reschedule. That's a huge professional courtesy. Your time's valuable, so we don't want to diminish that. But by understanding and offering that option for them, you are now ingratiated. It's now there's a huge gift that you've given them that could come back 2 to 3-fold. So it's just the right thing to do. Doesn't mean you do it, but you want to be flexible. So in fitting the corporate culture, you really need to investigate. In today's world, it's online. People you know who work there, what is on everything from Glassdoor to Indeed to anything on social media. Doesn't mean all of it's true. We know the world, unfortunately, has a lot of misinformation out there. That's one of the problems we as communicators are trying to repair. But at least do the investigation to find out the individual background. Again, LinkedIn is a great thing. If you know who the hiring manager is, find out, what their background is, so that you're more comfortable with the person you're talking to. Take the initiative to be a part of the internal and external company projects. So if you're targeting, I know this sounds a little bit encroaching, but here's the reason why it's important. If someone is doing an initiative, let's say going back to my days of Frito-Lay, where in a lockdown COVID world, maybe I'm looking for a job at Frito-Lay and I see they're doing a community event where they are going out and handing food and they're looking for volunteers. If you're wanting to work there, volunteer your time to go in and be a part of their team. It shows a huge effort of interest, and the executives notice that, but also you might learn things through the process of being shoulder to shoulder with them. And there's been a lot of community-based initiatives and philanthropy going on. So it's an easy thing to do. Another thing with LinkedIn, if you see a post, or whether it's a blog or a new executive joining the team, especially in today's world, talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, if you agree with their platform, you can like and share their comments and even add your own. That's what I'm talking about, being a part of that discussion. They see that, they acknowledge that, and it's a great way to become part of the team without ever being on staff yet at that point. And then also, you need to step outside of your work circle. So what I refer to is, if maybe you're in the art department or you've got a creative background, start following people in HR or finance or on the account services team. They're not necessarily the job you want, but knowing what these other contributors do in the organization can tell you volumes. And also, you'd be surprised who will be the person who will expose the opportunity for you that ultimately becomes your job. So it's not just that one small group, it's the entire network. I know this is a little confusing, and I'll send the PDF later, but in the job interview, these are all the different questions and in the process. So when you start down the interview cycle, there are things that you need to remember for the interview itself to be prepared early. You don't want to have your stomach growling in the middle of, especially a Zoom interview. Wear pants. I'll just start there. Wear pants. You never think they're going to see above, and all of a sudden you hear a knock at the door and you jump up. All of a sudden you realize suddenly you're in shorts and socks, and you don't want that embarrassing thing to be known for in your interview. Be prepared, and that includes have a glass of water, have a pen and paper, review your own answers, and then don't be surprised if it goes a different direction. Stay calm and contemplative. In determining your interest, the more you relate, especially on a video interview. In person, there's a lot of things you can do, and you'll pick up on body signals and eye gestures and things like that you're just not always going to get on a video interview. So knowing a little bit about what drives them, what are their passions and your passions, and how they correlate from hobbies to things in the professional space. Knowing about that company, and again, this was just a software company, but where they started, where their office is, the more you know about that, the more prepared you'll be. For the candidates also, when someone's looking at a candidate, they're always going to look at your tenures, what are the key terms we're looking for in the experience that you have, and then personal skills. Is this someone a dynamic speaker? Are they fun to be around? Are they just funny? What is it they bring to the table? You never get a second chance for a first impression. So you want to always put your best foot forward, whether it be on a video interview or in person. You want to definitely act in a way that is something that they will remember. You want to be clear and articulate. You want to have eye contact, even on looking at those cameras on those Zooms. I know are challenging. I deal with it all the time. So putting your camera at a point where you're comfortable not looking at your neck, or is your hair going crazy, whatever, you zone in and you become part of it like they're right in front of you, the more effective you'll be. Relax is so important. Again, you shouldn't be hungry, you shouldn't be thirsty, you shouldn't be getting back from a run, so you're winded, but be ready. And then also in your attire, we've talked about, be professional. In today's world, you don't have to have a coat and tie, you don't have to have a dress. In fact, I have someone interviewing today that she was concerned, should she wear her headphones? And I said, can you hear without them? And she said, no. And I said, then wear your headphones. That's what you do. You've got to be able to communicate. And in today's world, some of the rules have changed. In the interview prep, again, do your research, not just on the company, but also the role. How many other people have this job at the organization? Are there other people you can see what their paths were? Who are the decision makers? In many cases, it's maybe a peer, it could be a client, it could be the executives only. The reason for the opening, is it a backfill? Is it new? It's perfectly okay to ask those questions and to study. You need to know. If, for instance, the company has just gone through a merger, it's perfectly fair to say, have all of the positions been determined moving forward in the next 3 years? Because so many times in a merger, there's a 1 to 2 year plan where there will be reductions of staff that go on for 18 months to 24 months. You don't want to come in on a team that hasn't been cut yet. That's not you, last one hired, first one fired. So ask the questions, and you need to know those answers as much as you can. And I've yet to find any company that's not willing to answer those questions because they know it's relevant. But it's how you ask it. And once you gain their confidence and you find out that you play hockey, they play hockey, then you can get to where you need to go. Influencers, and again, we've talked about this a little bit. Influencers can be people that you know as friends, people who work there from associations, or someone you connected with in that HR team that you didn't know before, who is suddenly telling you their percentage of turnover, or maybe they won some key business and they're hiring 40 people. Those are things that you can really, really use in making your own decisions. And again, references, we've talked about that. The do's and don'ts. Be yourself, by far, is the most important. Answer questions honestly and succinctly. Don't feel like you have to go on for 5 minutes, because on a video call, you don't have it. But don't BS. Don't inflate your knowledge and try to represent that you have more than you do bring to the table. Do not bash a past employer. No employer, whether it was legitimate or not, wants to hear that conversation. That's the biggest red flag, where people, when they get overly comfortable, and again, I'm talking both sides of my mouth here. I want you to be comfortable and casual, but if you go too far where you spill too many family secrets, it can come back to bite you. So use common sense, but it is never good to talk ill about a supervisor or a company, because it just, no employer wants to hear that. Questions to ask are always, how soon are they looking to fill the position? Do you think I'm a good candidate for the role at the end of it? There's nothing wrong. And then asking for next steps. What was the next step in the process, and how can I prepare to give you exactly what you need in this process? So those are very real questions. There may also be things that come up during the course of the interview that are alerts for you, that someone said or asked, that you might want to go back and probe a little bit more. Maybe they're talking about a particular account where you have connections, and they're saying, you know, we're really growing this business at XYZ company, and you just happen to have done 2 projects a year and a half ago for XYZ company. That is something you can do, additional follow-up that really leaves you as a memorable person at the top of their list. Tips to get hired fast. Again, another, this is Catherine's song from 2018. Focus on your search, go in prepared. Don't stop applying. If you're in the final interviews, guess what? Things go south. There may be another candidate who's also awesome, or there may be a recruiter who's their champion, who's pushing them over the top, that you don't have that recruiter in your back pocket. So you need to keep applying, and until you've accepted a position, then you can stop. Dress the part. If it's a creative, be casual. Most worlds today, you don't have to wear a coat and tie, and they look at you funny if you do. Have a couple of personal stories that you can reference, because we get questions that come out of the blue. I have one client who loves asking, if you could be any bird, what type of bird would you be? And it throws people like, well, what the heck is that all about? But there's something psychological about it. They want to throw you, but they also want you to think in a different way about, and as you explain whatever bird you choose, it speaks volumes. So again, be prepared to offer some things, personal stories and situations, but also be ready for those curveballs. And then in today's world, it's so important to send a thank you note afterwards. Professionalism is never in any disregard regarding employment. People want to know that. A handwritten note is always best, and some people still get snail mail. But an email, if it's from the heart and not just a chain cut and paste, is always nice, especially if you reference back to any comments in the interview or things that you walked away with. Especially just kind of a recap so they know you paid attention, you listened. And if there was a question or objection, it's an opportunity for you to follow up on those topics and give them the answers that maybe you didn't have at the time. It's a great way to close. In the salary negotiation, again, do the research. What are other people doing the same job compensated? And you can get it through a variety of ways from a recruiter like myself. Some of these, I will tell you, like salary.com and Glassdoor, they're all over the place. You can't always count on that being accurate, but you have to get a compilation of these and then determine the average. You also look at your current base range and what you're looking to do. What is a reasonable increase? Doubling and tripling your salary in the next job isn't reasonable. It can happen. It's not reasonable. So 10 to 15% in a normal business is reasonable. 20 to 25 can happen. But anything more than that, it's all gravy. And a recruiter will help you with that on what the market will bear. And especially if you're relocating to a different market, because everything changes with that. Many employers, while the pandemic did not decrease salary levels, there were no significant increased levels, even in the industries that I told you were very hot and competitive. They haven't gone up yet. What I am seeing where the potential is very likely to go up is in the tech space because of our demand on digital and video and everything online. Professionals who can enhance and improve that process and measure those analytics are becoming very high demand, or in crisis communications, those people who write or have experience in that space are high demand. So it will likely go up, but it hasn't seen any huge change yet. You also need to look at the benefits, their bonus plan. Bonuses have gone up. Companies that used to do 10, 15% are now paying 25% to 50% bonuses, depending on the seniority of the individual. You also want to ask about the growth potential. What is your career trajectory in that organization? In an offer, typically there's a verbal meeting of the minds, if you will. If you're working with a recruiter like myself or anyone on our Chaloner team, we're going to give you, again, we start with what you're looking for. When an offer is made, we will kick it back to the client if they do not at least come in the tiers of what you've told us you would consider. Keep in mind, a recruiter's paid a percentage. That's how we make our fees of your base salary for the first year. So we will always negotiate as much as possible. But once there's a meeting of the minds and a verbal acceptance, then most companies will send out a written offer that you sign on the dotted line with your start date, and then everything else rolls from there. References are done at the point of once we've begun a verbal offer before a written offer is extended. So it's somewhere in that phase. And then if you get a counter offer, I will tell you, there are two reasons why I think counters can be troublesome. And I'll speak from the recruiter, and then I'll speak as an individual. As a recruiter, you have to have trust. We're coming in to get as much as possible for you, and we don't want to restart our search. We want to get you the job, and we want to mark that one closed and go on to the next one. So if it's all about the money, it's not a good hire. So I will typically, if there's a legitimate reason to counter, I may do it once. If they come back to me again, I will close and I'll go another direction. I won't work with a candidate if it's all about the money. And I can't trust them, because then I'm just chasing the bouncing red ball. And that's not a world I want to live in. The other thing is, once you've told a firm that you're about to accept an offer and you go back to your employer to give notice and they want to counter. Some people say, well, they're finally doing what I wanted them to do 2 years ago, and now they're giving me the money. But I will tell you, those acceptances are short-lived, because once they know you're looking, the clock starts, and they know you're high risk for departure. Regardless of keeping you, a target's on your back. So it very seldom works to your advantage to accept a counter with your existing company, because unless there's something radically that's changed, you were looking to leave for a variety of reasons. Those reasons aren't necessarily different, but now they're seeing that you are somewhat at risk. So everything will be scrutinized moving forward. If they give you a little more money, suddenly the role that they weren't watching your back, now they're micromanaging. So there are exceptions, but I've been doing this a long time, and I found more often than not, it does not work out. So make sure you get what you're looking for, and remind yourself why you started the process. That's it. You accept the offer, the negotiation, and then you move on from there. So that's everything I have in the presentation. I'm happy to address or answer any questions.
I think Terry, did you want to go through there? It looks like there were a couple questions in the chat.
I believe Ann said something about the Muppets, and it maybe threw her for a loop when she was in an interview, or she'd heard that someone brought up the Muppets during an interview, much like Larry had mentioned the bird.
Right,
what bird
right.
would you be, or what Muppet would you like to be?
And part of the reason why they're asking for, there's two reasons. It's the shock value of how do you deal with crisis or being thrown off your feet, because we all are. So you need to take it in stride and look at it for what it is and not overthink it. And there are no wrong answers in those scenarios either, because they're asking your opinion. So your opinion is the right answer.
Larry, I have a question for you. I work with students quite regularly at the various universities throughout the state of Nebraska. And recently, a professor asked me about leave behinds. I gave him some ideas of what I used to see when I was in a position of hiring people, which I'm not anymore, but I gave him some ideas. And then I sent it along to 4 or 5 agencies in town and asked them for some opinions. It was kind of interesting what I got back from some agency people. What do you think about leave behinds?
I think their day, for the most part, has come and gone. When I first started in recruiting, I was a big fan. In fact, I still have samples of people who just amazed me when I first started in recruiting. But because of the way we work in a virtual space, and even in our offices, that's all changed too. Once we go back in, the person who has their steady office, they're probably in a rotation. So they may be in just a few times. So having those leave behinds where someone keeps up with it, it's just almost going to be impossible to keep up with. I think a digital sampling is a great way to do it. It's the new version of the leave behind. So it could be a mini portfolio. It could be just one little fun animation. I had someone who sent me a little video animation that showed him dreaming through the night about the role he was going in for the interview. And then his excitement was when he got the offer and he had himself all gussied up heading into work. So it was fun. It was humorous. Humor is always great. Strong creative is always great. Anything that shows your personality or interest. But I will tell you, I had a leave behind from someone that just threw me for a loop. This is a digital person that I placed in the late 90s who built me a Zen garden. I'm all for everyone doing what they want to do, but she spent hours and probably $50 preparing this Zen garden. I'm not going to rake dirt in a box and move rocks. That's not me. So you have to think about your person receiving the item. Plus, I ended up spilling it all over my desk, which was horrible.
I have a question, Larry.
Sure.
And you may have touched on this briefly, but so a question that's come up recently, and it goes both sides of the spectrum, whether you're fresh out of school or you've been in the industry for many years. When it comes to listing your experience on your resume, do you have any recommendations on using like dates versus like, let's say April 2020 to April 21 versus saying just 1 year. And I ask that because I think there's always going to be unconscious bias. Like
Right.
if you put your high school on there and you put your graduation date, employers automatically look at that and they can judge your age. Obviously, they're not going to say we're not going to hire because of the age, but it's there in the back of the
Right.
head. And that same, like I said, call it fresh out of school or on the more experienced level. Is there any recommendation or what you've seen?
I'll give you my opinion. To me, honesty and transparency is always preferred. I have people who truncate resumes to the last 10 years, and whatever recruiter told them that was a good idea, I want to slap them because I don't agree. Your experience in its entirety is valuable. Where you've gone, what you've done tells me so much about you as talent. And if you've abbreviated your talent, you're basically giving me half your story. So we're already off to the wrong foot. And the other thing is I see people who are concerned about ageism, where they will abbreviate it, both young or old. And they feel like if I play it this way, you're going to believe it and I'll go with it. And I've been around long enough. I'll figure out what's going on. If you're telling me you've got 10 years experience and you're older than I am when you walk in the room, again, we're on the wrong foot. So transparency and honesty is always the best. I would rather see someone's full history. But what I will say about the dates, I think it's relevant to show your tenures from when you started until you left the organization. You may have had 3 roles in the organization. I don't need to know every break at every role within the organization. But for instance, if you worked at Frito-Lay for 10 years and during that time you had 3 jobs, great. Show me when you started, when you left, and that you had those roles, but I don't need to know the breakouts. Just like I don't need to know the year you graduated college or high school. I really don't need to know that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Larry, we have another question for you.
Mhm.
If you were fresh out of college, just freshly graduating, who is applying for entry-level position, this graduate? How do you suggest that we go about salary, and how do you negotiate if you don't necessarily have any agency experience behind you?
The truth is you are on the short end of the stick of negotiating if you're getting out of college. So you can know what the market will bear, but you have nothing to leverage more with because you don't bring much to the table. You may have raw talent, and that's great, but you're also high risk. You're high risk of departure. You're high risk of can you really do what you say you can do? And there are some great schools out there, but I promise you, when I graduated, there was maybe 1 class I took that actually helped me in my first job. The rest of them had no relevance whatsoever. So you're on the short end of the stick, and that experience will be more valuable to you than trying to negotiate more. I strongly discourage anyone for less than 3 years experience to try to leverage. Just know what you need to pay your bills and what you want going in. And if they come in there and you want the job, great. If they lowball, say thank you and walk out the door. You don't accept, I mean, you have to have respect for what you bring to the table.
And one more question for you. Say for an example, and I've got several students right now that I've been helping with their searches, and there are 4 of them that are NSAC students. And I keep stressing to them, please use that as not just that you were part of this team, but make sure that the employer knows what the National Student Advertising Competition is. And now I think they're at a point where they could probably share their videos. Is that something that I should suggest to them to?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will tell you, I see it on a resume, they get an interview. It matters for those in the communications and advertising space. We know how hard that program is and the value that comes out of it. So absolutely, I mean, it needs to be on their resume. It needs to be if they can delineate the role that they played on the team, that's good. But I'd like to at least see that they competed with the National Student Advertising Competition.
I just have one more question. Larry,
Sure.
you mentioned in your presentation no more than 2 pages for a resume.
Yes.
I'd always heard, no more than 1 page. And I know even my own resume, I try to keep it. But when you've been in the business for a long time, you can't really put a lot in there. So we're
right.
thinking 2 pages is okay. It's not going to be looked upon negatively.
No, 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 no. And in fact, if it's too short, it's what are they hiding? So you want to elaborate. In fact, on my LinkedIn, for those who are on the call, if you're not already connected to me on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. Under my About section, there is a specific article on recommended how to build a resume and things that I look for. There are also tips on the interview that are, some of these are highlighted in this presentation. But the purpose of a resume is not to get the job. It's to pique the hiring manager's curiosity. That's it. So 2 or 3 points under each job regarding what were your achievements and what you accomplished are fine. Doing multiple paragraphs on one job is just too much. Save something back for the interviews. That's where the people are hired, not the resume.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I think that might be the end of the questions. Larry, that was so awesome. Thanks again for
My
joining us
pleasure.
today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. And everyone, please stay safe. And it's getting better step by step. So.
Yes. And just kind of to wrap up, as I mentioned, early, our board of directors and membership team has been working hard to bring these creative events and conferences and new special events along with virtual programming to benefit our members. And speaking of member benefits, we have 2 member perks to award today. Sophie Davis from the University of Missouri and Melissa Steffens have both won $5 gift cards thanks to our member perk partners at Flagship Restaurant Group. And Sophie and Melissa, your gift cards will be mailed to you. We also today would like to thank Clark Creative Group, our April and May professional development sponsor, for their programming support, along with our elite sponsors and members from Centro and Woodman Life for their generosity to AAF Omaha throughout the year. Our sponsors are so important because they allow us to continue to bring professional development and educational opportunities to our members and the Nebraska advertising community. And if you are looking for any sponsorship opportunities, reach out for any of our advertising, marketing, and communications contacts, and reach out to me or Terry, and we can kind of give you a lineup of opportunities. A couple upcoming events that we want to talk about. Next week, April 29th, AF Omaha is planning Ad Wars. That's always a super fun event. This year, we've taken the show and fun event online for obvious reasons. Teams of 5 and 10 can register online now, and it's going to be super fun, and you'll have your advertising skills tested for sure. May 4th, we have a virtual Ad Connect panel discussion at 11 a.m. With incredible experience in belonging, support, and encouraging equity and inclusion to establishing organizations that support all members of our community, our panelists will share their thoughts and advice on how advertising and marketing professionals can better support diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts within our community through our work, relationship, actions, and beyond. And we know that's all too important right now, so that'll be a good event. Our 5th session of Ad Reads is interesting. Which is our virtual book club and happy hour, will be on May 13th from 5 to 5:45. I know I'm excited about this one. The book title is Juicing the Orange: How to Turn Creativity into Power Business Advantage. And that's Fred Sen, founding partner of Fallon Worldwide, who plans to join us that day. He and his partner, Pat Fallon, co-wrote this book, Juicing the Orange: How to Turn Creativity into a Power Business Advantage. It was published by Harvard Business School Press in July 2006, was written in commemoration of Fallon Worldwide's 25th anniversary. And this book outlines a compelling approach to actively building creativity into the organizational culture and leveraging that creativity into campaigns that deliver measurable results. So also mark your calendars for On Brand Conference in July. That'll be July 15th, and we've teamed up with the local chapters of PRSA, AMA, and AIGA once again to host that full day event. The conference agenda and registration will be open soon, so watch for details. And again, Larry, thanks so much. And thanks to our sponsors, Clark Creative Group, Centro, and Woodman Life. And we're only 1 minute over, so that's a success. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Erin.
Bye-bye.